Welcome into Southeastern CaroLINES. Happy week 7 in the SEC. We've got some fun divisional matchups today. We've got two undefeated SEC East teams going head to head today. So we're going to break down all of the information that you may need, any tips and tricks that I have to putting some money down on these games today and making as much money as possible. That is what we do here on Southeastern CaroLINES. I am your host, Caroline Fenton. We are here every Saturday morning from 10 to 10:30 live here at 312 Pizza Company in Germantown. So we appreciate 312 Pizza for hosting us every week. But let's get into it because we had a very, very weird week of college football last year. I mean, I'm sure Vegas made a ton of money off of all of the people who took Alabama minus 17.5, Alabama on the money line. But Alabama has proven us that they have some weaknesses, and Texas A&M, of all teams, a team that last week I said I thought they were completely done. I thought they were out of the picture after losses to Arkansas and Mississippi State, but they showed us, hey, nope, we've still got some tricks up our sleeve, and Alabama proved that they are not this unbreakable, unbeatable team that we usually know them to be. So that was exciting to watch last week. We will get into all of the action this week. This game, first and foremost, I thought was going to be a very, very interesting matchup. First up, we've got Auburn traveling to number 17 Arkansas. We've got Florida, number 20 team in the country, traveling to Baton Rouge, taking on the Tigers at Death Valley. 21, Texas A&M, previously unranked. This is the first Alabama loss to an unranked team in God knows how long. 21st ranked Texas A&M travels to Columbia, Missouri to take on those Tigers. Number 11 Kentucky at number 1 Georgia. We've got a new number 1 team in the country in the house. The Bulldogs take the top spot in the country. Vanderbilt at South Carolina. Not a very exciting SEC East matchup. Two of the worst teams in the SEC East, if not the two worst teams in the SEC East. But hey, they're playing nonetheless, and we can still make money on it, no matter how bad or sloppy the game might be. Number 5, Alabama, dropping from that number 1 spot to the number 5 slot. Alabama at Mississippi State. And finally, Lane Kiffin, a little homecoming for him this weekend. Number 13, Ole Miss, travels to Knoxville to take on the Vols at Neyland Stadium. But we will start things off with Auburn at number 17, Arkansas. And I really had kind of a difficult time trying to decide what I wanted to do with this game because I thought a few weeks ago that Auburn was going to take a step back. Brian Harsin in his first year as head coach at Auburn, and I am not really that high on Bo Nix, but I think the past couple of weeks, Auburn has made a lot of strides. Bo Nix has made a lot of strides. In the past, Bo Nix was sloppy, made some silly decisions. Against LSU, Bo Nix proved to me, and I think shocked the world with his ability to scramble, his ability to run on the ground, as well as get things done in the air. So Auburn has been making some strides over the past couple of weeks. But I'm going to take Arkansas on this one. The spread here is minus 3.5. And while I do think this game will stay close, I think that Auburn maybe even get the lead, maybe even at the half, maybe hold the lead for a good bit of the game. But I do think that Arkansas ends up getting it done. So I'm going to take Arkansas minus 3.5. And Auburn just got stopped 34-10 against Georgia at home. But it kind of feels like so far this year, everyone's going to get stomped by Georgia. So I'm not necessarily going to read too far into it. But I do think that one important thing to note here is that Auburn was at least able to score a touchdown against the best defense in college football right now. Probably the best defense in college football that we've seen in a very long time. So, hey, I'm not going to read too far into that game. That's not necessarily why I think Arkansas gets it done. I mean, Arkansas was just barely edged out in a barn burner game against Ole Miss. I don't think Arkansas fans should be discouraged by this loss at all. I don't think they should be discouraged by their loss to Georgia at all. Like I said, Georgia's beating everyone and beating everyone handedly, it feels like. So Arkansas fans, still be down on yourself for those 2 back-to-back losses because it is major improvement for Arkansas. And like I said, Auburn's passing game is starting to get things figured out. This offense has hit 250 yards or more in each of their last 3 games, which doesn't sound like a lot, 250 yards of offense, but Auburn has proved that they've been able to get it done if they can hit that benchmark. They're 4-0 when they get at least 400 yards of offense and 0-2 when they don't. So if Auburn has any shot to win this game, they need to start getting things done on offense. But Arkansas allowed over 600 yards of total offense to Ole Miss in last week's loss, their 52-51 loss last week. But that was the only time all season that Arkansas has given up more than 400 yards. Auburn is not Ole Miss offensively. I mean, I think if you look at a matchup between Georgia, if you see that the other team didn't score very many points, I don't think that's necessarily indicative of how good that offense is because Georgia's defense is just that good. I think you can say the same thing on the opposite side of the ball with Ole Miss. If you give up a ton of yards of offense, if you give up a ton of points to Ole Miss, that doesn't really say anything about your defense because Ole Miss's offense is just that explosive. So like I said, Auburn's offense isn't even nearly close to as explosive as Ole Miss's is. So I think that Arkansas is going to be able to hold Auburn off and definitely will not be able to get 400 yards of offense for Auburn. They've been solid. They've improved over the last few games. Arkansas has really, really solid offensive line play. They have a stout running game. After 2 losses, they're going to be able to want to come back, beat an SEC West rival Auburn at home. So I'm going to take Arkansas minus 3.5. I do think it could possibly come down to just a field goal. So that the 3.5, that little hook there makes me a little bit nervous, but I do think that Arkansas is going to want to make a statement after such a devastating loss against Ole Miss last week. So give me Arkansas minus 3.5. Next, we've got number 20, Florida, traveling to Baton Rouge to take on the Tigers at LSU. So if you think about that LSU-Florida game last year, LSU was a 22.5-point underdog in Gainesville, and LSU was able to pull out a win by a field goal, a very narrow game. If you remember, that was that shoe game that LSU got incredibly lucky toward the end of the game. They were able to pull it out by a field goal, so this might make you think, okay, LSU's been down the past couple of weeks. Maybe this is the game that shocks the world yet again, and LSU upsets Florida yet again. Don't get cute with it. Don't think too far into it. In the last decade, LSU has been a double-digit underdog only twice, both of those against Alabama. So if this shows you anything, and that's a double-digit underdog at home only twice. Let me specify that. But if that shows you anything, it's just how down Vegas is on LSU, and I'm going to have to take Vegas on this one. Florida bounced back from a loss at Kentucky with a 42-0 spanking over Vanderbilt last Saturday. Beating Vanderbilt 42-0 isn't necessarily a statement win, and I think Florida's looking for another statement win to get back on track after that loss against Kentucky. The Gators held the ball for only 23 minutes, but they outgained Vanderbilt 479 yards to just 287. Now, Vanderbilt's defense is not as good as LSU's is going to be, but I'm not necessarily very high on LSU's defense. So, Florida might not be able to put up almost 500 yards of offense, but I absolutely do think that they are going to get it done because they're averaging 500 yards of offense a game. On the other hand, LSU was just beat handedly by number 11 in the country, Kentucky, a 42-21 loss in Lexington. But honestly, it felt worse than 42-21. That might be my own personal fandom coming out, making it feel like, oh God, like it just one after another just gets worse and worse and worse. But it really did feel like that was more of a handed beating than 42-21. LSU trailed by multiple scores for almost the entire game. 45 minutes of the game, LSU trailed by 10 or more. LSU has posted fewer yards than its opponents in 4 of their 6 games of the season. Those 2 games that they did outgain opponents were non-conference games, so things you can't really take into account here against McNeese State. But like I said, don't let last year's game cloud your judgment here. Florida will win this game handedly. Florida's next game is Georgia after a bye week between this LSU and Georgia game. If they lose to LSU, and I'm going to go ahead and say they probably lose to Georgia as well because Georgia has shown us that they are unbeatable, that would be 3 games that Florida loses in their last 4. I don't think Dan Mullen is going to be digging a hole that deep for his team. I think that Florida knows what they're up against here. They want to make that statement win after losing to Kentucky. They want to get a little bit of momentum if they're going to have any chance at beating Georgia in 2 weeks after their bye. So I think that they know that going into this game. Plus, LSU has been bitten by the injury bug so terribly this year. They're without their corner, Elias Ricks. He's injured. Their top wide receiver, Max Johnson's favorite target, Kayshon Boutte, their wide receiver, is out. He left the Kentucky game with an injury there. Their defensive end, Ali Gay, safety Major Burns, tackle Joseph Evans, defensive end Andre Anthony, linebacker Jared Small. This LSU team is depleted. And all of the conversation surrounding LSU so far this year is how long is Coach O's tenure going to last in Baton Rouge. And I think that the players kind of feel the weight on their shoulders. I think the players feel that this program feels incredibly uninspired at the moment. So I do think that Florida is going to win this game and think they're going to win it handedly. So I'm going to take Florida minus 11.5. LSU has no ground game. Florida has one of the best ground games in the country. So when it comes to the X's and O's, when it comes to kind of the off the field things as well. Florida just gets all of the advantages here. So I think that Florida comes into Baton Rouge and gets the job done. Newly ranked number 21 Texas A&M, coming off their big time win against Alabama, travels to Columbia, Missouri to take on the Tigers. This was kind of a tough one for me, not because I don't know who's going to win, because I feel like Texas A&M is going to win this game. I feel pretty confident about that. But I've had a really tough time trying to figure out this Texas A&M offense. I mean, is this an offense that was explosive and was able to beat Alabama? Or is this an offense that wasn't able to get things moving against Arkansas and Mississippi State? And that's no knock to Arkansas and Mississippi State. Arkansas is a team that has very much so proved themselves to be an incredibly improved team. Mississippi State, another one I can't necessarily figure out, but I don't really know which Texas A&M offense I'm willing to trust here. Either way, I think Texas A&M gets it done. I'm going to take Texas A&M minus 8.5. The over-under here is 60.5. I'm actually going to take the under on this one, even though I think Texas A&M is going to put up some major points because Mizzou has one of the worst defenses, not just in the SEC, but in college football. They now hold the third worst defense in college football. I don't think Missouri is going to be able to put up that many points. I'm going to take the under as well. Missouri, I mentioned their defense is absolutely atrocious. So they've allowed 450 yards or more against everyone on their schedule so far except Southeast Missouri State, including North Texas, who they played last week. And North Texas played them very closely. So I do not trust this Missouri defense at all to be able to get a win. Missouri could not stop the Tennessee running game, couldn't stop the North Texas passing game. Third worst defense in college football. I think Texas A&M is going to have themselves a field day against this defense. The one caveat here, could this be a hangover game for Texas A&M? It's happened before. It could happen again. Texas A&M just took down the number one team in the country. They're in division rival Alabama. They could be riding high. I mean, when you look at it, I mean, Missouri's running back, Tyler Beatty, is coming off of his second 200-yard rushing day of the season. Missouri's quarterback, Connor Bazelak, is around 300 yards, a little bit more, maybe a little bit less, passing machine. This offense is number one in the SEC in third down conversions. I mean, Mizzou's offense can put up some points now. And Texas A&M could have themselves a little bit of a hangover. But I think you're thinking too much into it if you're looking at it that way. I mean, if you look at it on paper, if you look at the X's and O's, Texas A&M is a better team than Missouri. Missouri's defense is atrocious. They're not going to be able to stop that Texas A&M offense, whether it's the one that we saw against Alabama that seems unstoppable, or if it was even the one that kind of couldn't even get things going against Mississippi State or Arkansas. I still think they're able to trump the Tigers at home. So it might take Texas A&M a little bit of time to get going. Might take them a little bit of time to put some points on the board. Might take them about a half to start getting and pulling away with the win. I do think that Texas A&M gets it done at least by a touchdown, if not more. So give me Texas A&M minus 8.5. This next game, I am absolutely shocked that there hasn't been more conversation about it. You know those games that people talk about at the beginning of the season that they're like, okay, you know, we're really bookmarking week 6, week 7, week 8, whatever it may be. I think at the beginning of this season, it was Texas A&M, Alabama. I thought it wasn't going to be an exciting game. Obviously, I was proven wrong. Always Florida, Georgia is a game that people put in their calendars and they circle it as a game that's going to be very exciting. This game should feel like that. Kentucky, Georgia should feel like that because it's two of the lone undefeated SEC teams. They're both 6-0, both SEC East rivals. So why has there not been more discussion about these two 6-0 teams? Number 11, Kentucky, traveling to Athens, taking on number 1, Georgia. Why is this not a big deal? It's because Georgia's going to win and they are going to beat Kentucky handedly. This is not going to be a barn burner game. This is not going to be a shootout. This is not going to be some sort of game that is back and forth and two of the best teams in the country. It's not going to be that. It feels like it should be because it's two undefeated teams, but it's not going to be that because Georgia's defense is just that good. It is the best defense in college football. It is not even close. It is the best defense in college football that I have seen in quite some time. It's not all bad for Kentucky. I mean, Kentucky has yet to allow any team to hit 175 rushing yards. No one has thrown for 300. They're a disciplined team. They keep their penalties to a minimum. They've been able to knock off some pretty stout competition. They were able to knock off Florida. But Kentucky isn't necessarily extraordinary in anything. They have a pretty solid running game for sure. They're disciplined. And like I said, they don't get a ton of penalties and they don't beat themselves. by getting a bunch of flags, and Will Levis has been able to get it done in the air. And Kentucky's passing attack has seemed to be a little bit intimidating so far this year. They don't force turnovers, and that's the only way that they're going to be able to beat Georgia is if they force the ball out of Georgia's hands. I mean, Kentucky's averaging 31 points a game, but there is absolutely no way that Georgia's defense is going to let them score that many. I mean, Georgia's allowing just 2.5, if even less, yards per rushing attempt this season. That's the third best run defense in the country. Georgia has not allowed an offensive touchdown in the first half of the game this season. Georgia has not allowed an offensive touchdown in the first half of a game this season. In 6 weeks, their opponents have not scored an offensive touchdown in the first half. And only 3 total in 6 games. Only 3 touchdowns in 6 games, which is absolutely remarkable and is a huge testament to this Georgia defense. Their defense only allows 17.5 points per game. So Kentucky is not extraordinary really at anything. They're solid and they're good at a lot of things. Georgia is extraordinary at a lot of things. They have one of the best defensive lines in the country. They have one of the best offensive lines in the country. It's incredibly difficult to beat Georgia in the trenches. Stetson Bennett has been filling in just fine for an injured JT Daniels. Of course, their offense looks a little bit different. It's more of a passing attack with JT Daniels, but Stetson Bennett has been able to get it done. And I think that Georgia is going to rely very heavily on their run game here. Stetson Bennett threw 2 interceptions last week. He's going to have to limit his interceptions. And I think that Kirby Smart knows that Stetson Bennett isn't necessarily as much of a passing threat. So I think they're going to rely on the run game very much so here. And they take care of business. I mean, the spread here is 23.5, which may sound ridiculous for the number 11 team in the country. It may sound ridiculous for a team that beat Florida. It may sound ridiculous for a team that is undefeated. But Georgia is just that good, and they proved themselves to be so far this season. So give me Georgia minus 23.5. Over under here is incredibly low. It is 44.5. Now, I know I've been boasting about Georgia's defense very much so, but I think Kentucky's able to score a few points. They may be forced to kick a few field goals here and there, but I'm going to take the over on 44.5 because I think Georgia's going to be able to score big-time points here. I think Kentucky does too. I don't think they get shut out here, but Georgia definitely wins this game handedly. Probably the least exciting game in the SEC. Not probably. It is the least exciting game in the SEC this week, and I'm so sorry to Vanderbilt fans and South Carolina fans, but this game, just compared to the rest of the slate, is kind of at the bottom of my list here in terms of interest. Vanderbilt traveling to Columbia, South Carolina to take on the Gamecocks. I'm actually going to take Vanderbilt against the spread here. South Carolina is currently favored by 18.5, but I don't think South Carolina is a good enough team to be favored by that many points. I don't really care who they're playing. I think Vanderbilt covers. I mean, it's a battle of 2 of the worst teams in the SEC East. Vanderbilt's offense is improving. Through 6 weeks, we have seen some improvement from Vanderbilt, but it's not really intimidating by any means. Now, South Carolina's running back, Kevin Harris, has been fine. He's a big run threat for South Carolina, but he's been fine in the running game. He'll get the ball moving, especially against this Vanderbilt defense that isn't very good. But, I mean, both defenses are horrendous on third down. And it's going to be some very sloppy football here. I mean, Vandy won't pressure South Carolina to turn the ball over. Even though South Carolina has been a turnover machine, they've been turning the ball over more than any other team in the SEC. But I think if South Carolina loses this game, it's because they lost it for themselves. Vanderbilt won't really apply too much pressure on South Carolina's offense to turn the ball over. Their defensive line has had consistent trouble pressuring up the middle. So I think South Carolina wins this game very much so, but I think Vanderbilt keeps it close. I don't think South Carolina has the business of being favored by that much, but expect a low scoring, I guess fairly close game, maybe a touchdown, maybe 10 points, maybe 2 touchdowns, but I don't think anything more than that. But do expect to see some sloppy football here, but a great opportunity for South Carolina to get things moving after they've had some difficult opponents over the past few weeks. Number 5, Alabama, which sounds ridiculous to say. Number 5, Alabama. I've been so used to saying number 1, Alabama, number 2, Alabama, but this has got to be the lowest they've been ranked in quite some time. But number 5, Alabama, traveling to Starkville to take on Mississippi State. Now, the spread here is 17. And you might be thinking, okay, Alabama just lost to Texas A&M. They've proved that they have some weaknesses. Mississippi State beat Texas A&M. So you may look at this and say, okay, Mississippi State beat Texas A&M. Texas A&M beat Alabama. they should get it done. Mississippi State could beat Alabama. I don't think that's how this is going to work here. Don't get cute with it. Don't think too far into it. Alabama's going to win this game, and I'm going to take Alabama minus 17 and a half. And the very first thing I thought of when Texas A&M beat Alabama this past weekend was, oh my gosh, I feel bad for Mississippi State, because I know for a fact that Nick Saban has been instilling the fear of God in these young men over the past few weeks. He has been on their asses all week, and I haven't been there, but I can only expect that that's exactly what he's been doing. So I think that Alabama comes into this game angry. I think they come into this game incredibly motivated, and they come into this game and every other game on the rest of their schedule knowing that if they lose that game, their shot at the college football playoff is done. You cannot get into the college football playoff with 2 losses with this 4-team playoff format that we currently are in. So Alabama knows that. Nick Saban knows that. So I think that they beat Mississippi State handedly here. Alabama won last year's game against Mississippi State 41-0. That was in Tuscaloosa, to be fair, but that is a very, very bad beating. They've outscored Mississippi State 103-7 in the last 3 games in their matchups. 103-7, which is absolutely ridiculous. Now, you may look at that game against Texas A&M and say, well, hey, this isn't the same Alabama team as last year. And that's true. They've lost a ton of assets that they had last year. But against Texas A&M, Alabama didn't necessarily have a bad game. They had 153 yards on the ground, 522 total yards of offense. Bryce Young was able to get that ball moving now. So it wasn't enough against Texas A&M. And Texas A&M played their butts off last week. It wasn't enough quite to beat them, but it would be very much so enough to beat Mississippi State. I mean, Mississippi State's pass defense is inconsistent. And while we're at it, can we just admit that Mississippi State's team as a whole is inconsistent? I never really know what to expect from them. I don't know if it's going to be this ridiculous Mike Leach pass attack, spread offense, difficult to defend, or if it's going to be something that's incredibly easy to figure out. And it feels like every week it's completely different. But the Alabama passing attack is averaging over 9 yards per throw, 21 touchdowns, and 3 picks so far this season. So Mississippi State having a fair to below average passing attack is really going to be, I think, the pin in this game for them. Mississippi State has 0 rushing attack. So what they could make up for on offense that they can't cover on defense, I don't think it's necessarily there. And I think Alabama knows that how to shut down this Mike Leach offense. Their passing attack could keep things interesting. Their spread defense could stop Alabama on a few possessions. I am not counting that out at all. I think Mississippi State does score some points here. And I think that they are able to make a few stops against Alabama, but I don't think it's going to be enough to keep this game close. The last time that Alabama lost back-to-back regular season games was in 2007. And that was actually the last time they lost to Mississippi State, too. Florida was able to keep it close. A&M beat them. This team has weaknesses, but they're still Alabama. And if nothing else, Nick Saban will make sure this team does not lose this game because he understands the consequences. Now, this is a game that I've been really, really excited to get to all show long, because I think that not only is it going to be offensive fireworks, there's going to be so much chirping off the field, and it's going to be all from Lane Kiffin. As Lane Kiffin makes his return to Knoxville, but on the other sideline, Ole Miss going into Neyland Stadium and taking on this electric Tennessee offense that we have seen the past couple of weeks. It seems that Josh Heupel, high-powered, super quick, big yardage type of offense has finally started to click with the Vols and Hendon Hooker. So Ole Miss ranks number 2 in the country with 562 total yards per game, which is astronomical. And not only that, Matt Corral has thrown for close to 1,500 yards in only 5 games. He has 12 touchdowns, 8 rushing touchdowns, 0 interceptions. I mean, this Ole Miss offense has been electric, which we saw last year as well. But Ole Miss's defense has been able to figure things out as well. And I mean, I'm not going to call them a Georgia defense. They're not one of the top defenses in the league. But with an offense like that, you don't necessarily need an elite defense. You just need a defense that's able to stop some things. I think one advantage that Tennessee has here is that while Ole Miss's defense has improved, their rush defense has not looked very good. And Tennessee's big-time threat is on the ground. We've seen Jabari Small, Tiana Evans, even quarterback Hendon Hooker be incredibly mobile and able to get some big-time yards up on the ground. So I think that could be an Achilles heel for Ole Miss here. But I am going to have to say that Ole Miss gets it done here. I mean, the Vols have flexed their offensive muscle over the past 2 games. They've averaged almost 54 points a game against Missouri and South Carolina. They've scored 34 or more points in 5 of their 6 last games. They've hit the over in 4 of their past 5. I mean, like I said, this is going to be a fireworks show on offense. Tyon Evans has been that home run hitter on the ground that the Vols have been lacking over the past few years. Hendon Hooker continues to prove that he should have been the starter all along over Joe Milton. But I think Matt Corral, Snoop Connor, and this Ole Miss offense is going to be just too much for this Tennessee defense to stop and just too much for this Tennessee offense to keep up with and make up for. And we really don't have enough of a sample size from this Tennessee offense. I mean, I know in the past 2 games, they've scored 54 points or more, average 54 points. But against Missouri and against South Carolina, Missouri has one of the worst defenses in college football. South Carolina doesn't necessarily seem to be too big of a threat. A better defense than Missouri, of course, but I need to see Tennessee do it against a team like Ole Miss, against a team like Alabama, against a team like Florida, a team that they weren't able to beat. I mean, they looked great in the first half, very much so, but they slowed down in the second half. I think that's one of Tennessee's biggest issues here is I have not watched them play a full, complete game yet. Against South Carolina even, they put up big numbers in the first half. And then in the second half, that kind of started to trail off. South Carolina was able to score a few more points and kind of keep the game a little bit more interesting than it should have been. So I think that Ole Miss is going to win this game here. The spread here is 3, which is incredibly difficult and doesn't give you a ton of leeway here. I think your best bet here is Ole Miss minus 145 on the money line, which I think that proves that Vegas is pretty high on Tennessee. If the odds for Ole Miss on the money line are that low. But I think that Ole Miss gets it done here. I think Tennessee absolutely keeps things interesting. And if you're a Tennessee fan watching this game, I do predict Ole Miss to win, but I don't think Tennessee fans should be upset about this loss because the conversation surrounding this game has been so much more back and forth rather than one-sided, which I think Tennessee fans have gotten, unfortunately, so used to having the conversation surrounding their games be so lopsided, be so, we're hammering the other team. The other team is so much better. Tennessee just gets run over. So I think that this has been a really exciting conversation about the Vols, and it's not a knock on their offense whatsoever. It's just that Ole Miss's offense is elite. And I do think that this Tennessee offense can also be elite. But at this point, I haven't quite seen enough to be able to feel confident about Tennessee winning this game. But I do absolutely think that they keep it close. And I do think that they could get a lead maybe at the half, and they could get a lead at some point in the game, very much so. But I think here, I've been talking about the offensive fireworks from these two teams because you got Lane Kiffin, you got Josh Heupel, 2 offensive masterminds, but the over-under is set here at 79.5. I would not be surprised if that over hit, but 80 points is a whole heck of a lot of points. And so I think I take the field here. I think I'm going to take the under here, and I actually am going to make that my lock of the day. Under here is minus 112. Over under set at 79.5. I know it very much so could hit. I know that these two teams can put up some serious points. I mean, Ole Miss, Arkansas, the combined score was like 103, something astronomical like that. But I'm going to take the under just because taking the over on 80 points does not make me feel very good. So I'm going to take the under here as well. But exciting game in Knoxville nonetheless. And I think that Lane Kiffin has just got to stop doing the things that he thinks are cute. He wanted to make a statement against Alabama, so he went forward on every single 4th down in the first quarter, which really set his team up for failure, in my opinion. So I think that if Ole Miss wants to win this game, Lane Kiffin has got to cut out the cute stuff. Just play football, play smart football. If you need to play boring football for a little bit in order to get a win, do that. Do what you got to do, but don't be cute with it. Again, this is Southeastern CaroLINES. I'm Caroline Fenton, your host. I'm at 312 Pizza Company today and every Saturday at 10 a.m. previewing the SEC slate of the day. I'll run through my picks again. If you want to throw some money out on those, get your sports books out, get your money ready. Because I'm taking Arkansas minus 3.5 against Auburn. Auburn has made improvements throughout the season, but I think that Arkansas, after 2 losses, is ready to make a statement win. Florida traveling to Baton Rouge to take on LSU. This LSU team's uninspired. They're injured. All of the conversation is about LSU's head coach, Ed Orgeron, potentially getting fired, while Florida wants to make that statement win after losing to Kentucky, while Florida has one of the biggest run threats in the country, and LSU has no running game whatsoever. So I'm going to take Florida to cover minus 11.5. I think that'll be a 2-touchdown game. Number 21, Texas A&M, coming off of a win against Alabama, traveling to Missouri. I'm taking Texas A&M minus 8.5, just because this Missouri defense is atrocious. Kentucky, number 11 at number 1, Georgia, 2 undefeated teams. The only 2 undefeated teams left in the SEC. I think Georgia wins big here. I'm taking Georgia minus 23.5. Kentucky is a good team, but just not good enough to keep it close with Georgia. Vanderbilt, traveling to South Carolina. Not going to be the most exciting game out there, but that's okay. I am going to take Vanderbilt to cover plus 18.5. Alabama, the number 5 team in the country, slipping from number 1, going to Mississippi State. I think Alabama is pissed about their loss against Texas A&M, and they want to prove to people, hey, we're not number 5. We are a top 4 team in the country, and we're going to the college football playoff. So I think they win big, and I'm going to take Alabama minus 17. Ole Miss, Lane Kiffin's return to Knoxville. Give me Ole Miss on the money line, minus 145. Tennessee will keep it close. This will be a high-scoring game. But at the end of the day, Ole Miss has shown me all that I need to see to be able to know that they will get this job done. That's going to do it for me, Southeastern CaroLINES, every Saturday at 10 a.m. Thank you to 312 Pizza Company, who sponsors this show, who hosts this show every Saturday. We appreciate them very much. And if you're looking for a job, if you're looking for a little bit of a side hustle, they are hiring. They're hiring servers, bartenders, cooks, front of house, back of house. So if you are looking to pick up a little something on the side, if you're looking to get into the service industry, they would more than appreciate your help. So good luck to everyone today. Good luck to your teams, the ones that you put money on, the ones that you have your heart into. Good luck to your teams, and I will see you all next Saturday.